Hello, this is Anna Lowe, and I'm here today to take you with me as I scout for locations for my book, Maidens, London. This is actually the second book in my Billionaires and Bodyguards series. As I was finishing Book 1, set in Paris, I had a rough idea of the main events in Book 2, Maidens, London. But those were just the basics, so I planned a trip to London to help me work out some of the details, because I find when I walk around the location for a story, aspects of the story will just pop out at me. So I went to London, which isn't hard for me, luckily, because I live in Europe, so it's close and fairly affordable. And I did what I started out doing what I usually do, even in a city like London, where I've been many times before. I just kind of set out on a long walking tour of the basics. So I kind of walked along the Thames, and in my mind, I've got what I want to write. But I wasn't quite sure in my head whether I was going to do a dragon or a lion shifter. But the more I walked around London, the more I noticed the lions. And of course, the lion is a symbol of England, but they are everywhere. This is in Westminster, Trafalgar Square, along the banks of the Thames, where I guess barges used to tie up, Buckingham Palace. The details, if you look at this is also close to Buckingham Palace. Lions, lions, lions. And I almost got to thinking, well, poor dragons. Why do lions steal the show here? And you really had to look to find a dragon. Here's a small one near the Tower of London, and there's one high up near Westminster Abbey. So just walking around and seeing that made this whole world come alive in my mind about the ruling lions and how dragons are kind of looked down upon, and that helped me decide what kind of hero I wanted, and it actually ended up making a much richer story with those layers of conflict between types of shifters and maybe class and things like that. So just seeing all those lions around London got my mind thinking in a whole new direction that I wouldn't have otherwise done. And I did come with the idea, well, maybe my hero will be a dragon. So one of the things I did that I had planned ahead of time, because my trips are always a combination of a few key planned things and a lot of time for unplanned kind of serendipitous moments. So one of the things I had planned was going on the London Eye, which is a big like Ferris wheel that goes around by the banks of the Thames. And I figured that would give me like a dragon's eye view of the city. And in fact, indeed it did. It was a lot of fun. And that made its way into the book in the end. So another thing I had planned was to go to Notting Hill, just to I wasn't sure whether I would use it or not. I hadn't been there on previous trips, but of course I'd seen the movie and it made this whole neighborhood kind of put it on the map for me. So I thought, well, it'll be fun. I'll just walk around and see what I see. And they've got these pretty houses, all different colors, nice little neighborhood. As you get to the Portobello Road, I came across a map shop, and I love map shops, and it has all these old maps. And in no time, that became one of the settings in my story. That's where Gemma works. And as you walk along Portobello Road, there's just vendors selling all kinds of things. And that was also a great location for Gemma to pick up the bracelets, which also play a role in the story. So just little details pop out just by walking around and seeing things that are just normal everyday things in the city. Of course, London wouldn't be London without the underground, so riding the tube, and that was good. I specifically kept my eyes and ears open because I thought, well, this would be good for kind of a spooky, kind of I'm being followed type of scene, and it allowed me to pick up details like this. They have these fisheye mirrors in the kind of blind corner, so you can see what's coming around the corner, and all kinds of things little details I like to incorporate in my stories. And that was in the same long day where I headed over to Hyde Park, because that's one of those must-do things in London, right? And I thought I could find, and indeed I did, some nice penthouses overlooking Hyde Park, because I thought, well, where in the city could a lion shifter or a dragon shifter live and have a nice, number one, a nice apartment, and B, some room to roam at night. And I figured Hyde Park would accomplish that. But in doing this trip to Hyde Park, when I got there were a lot of people, and there were signs, and there were people heading off to a rally. and it was Stand Up to Racism, the rally. And that also became part of my story. I ended up following people over to the center of the action and listening for a while and thinking, wow, what a great thing that these people are doing, of course. And what a great thing that I could have Gemma, my heroine, be involved in, since she's into all kinds of important social causes and environmental causes. So I thought that was great. Another part of the story that just wrote itself. So another thing I had planned was, almost more for personal reasons, was to go to Primrose Hill, because I had read about it and read that there's nice views from over London from that hill. So up I went to Primrose Hill, very nice views, of course, and it's up a hill, obviously, and from there I thought, because I had taken a taxi there, I wanted to do some more walking, so I walked down the hill towards Regent's Park. And there, completely unexpectedly, something I hadn't picked up from my travel books or maps was Regent's Canal, this canal that goes through all around London. And as you walk around, I saw these narrow boats. I thought, oh my gosh, these are houseboats. People are living on them. And I was just so smitten. I love tiny little, even though I love grand penthouses and castles and things like that, I also love cozy little homes. So I thought, oh, how can I work this into the story? So again, simply by walking around the city, cool little aspects of the story kind of write themselves right into your mind, which it's why I love travel, and it's why I love writing about real places and kind of combining my imagination with real things. And especially since this is a research trip, I really took a good look around, and I paid attention to things like, so how does this work with these boats? And you could see signs that have the regulations and how long you can keep your boat there. But I also came across some other signs. The Towpath Task Force, it ended up in the book. And here's the Safer Parks panel. It's somewhere else in the city I came across this. That ended up in the book. So I just love things like that, I have to say. So at the end of that long day of researching and sightseeing, another thing I had planned was I actually went to the East End of London, where I had booked a Jack the Ripper tour. So like you walk around the neighborhood and they tell you the story of Jack the Ripper. And I wasn't really interested in putting that in my story in any way, but I thought it would be a safe way for me to walk in London in back alleys at night with a group. So it was just my cheap excuse. But it was quite an interesting tour. It's kind of sad that the neighborhood is just, the historic neighborhood is getting swallowed up by these very ultra-modern buildings, which I find sad. There are still nice little corners and alleys where you can pick up on the old feeling. I didn't end up using much of that directly in the book, as it turned out. So sometimes you plan things and you think, well, this has potential, like the Ferris wheel, the London Eye, as a dragon eye view of the city. But this Jack the Ripper tour was one of the things that was fun, but it didn't add to the story in the end. Another day that I had in this city is I thought, okay, I wanted to go out somewhere. I thought, where is an open area not too far from London that I could potentially stage, a final confrontation, whether it's dragons or lions? Where could that be? And I thought for a while it might be Kew Gardens. And Kew Gardens is out at the end of one of the subway lines. And I just hopped on, and that's where I was going. I was going to Kew Gardens. But as I headed out there, I saw, well, just 2 or 3 stops after that is Richmond. And that's the end of the line, I believe. And I thought, okay, well, why don't I do this differently? I'll go to Richmond and then work my way back over Kew Gardens. Well, I fell in love with Richmond, and I never made it to Kew Gardens. Because Richmond is just a lovely town on the Thames. I just one look, and I thought, I've got to walk along this canal riverside path. And it was a sunny day. It was windy as anything and quite cold. But it's just lovely scene with the boats and everybody out. And I started walking up along the Thames, and you get to this neighborhood right outside Richmond. And again, lions. And really nice kind of manor houses behind walls, and open land, and some cute little brick back alleys between the properties, and just my imagination just took off again. And if you've already read the book, Fire Maidens London, you know that Richmond plays a role too. If you haven't read it yet, I won't give it away. I'll let you read it and discover how Richmond and Petersham comes into play. And what as I was sitting on the tube on a long ride out, I was reading about Richmond, and there's Richmond Park, which used to be, I believe, a royal hunting ground, and now it's a public park. And I thought, oh, that would be nice. And one of the features they have up there is this protected view. I can't remember how many miles outside London Centre it is, but there's a view from Richmond Park, which is on a hill, right to the cathedral in London. And it's a protected view. So no buildings could be built along that line, and the trees are clipped back. So you can just barely see this narrow line, but they have a telescope set up there, and you can see it's right to the center of London. And that was just a really cool thing. And I thought I might work Richmond Park into my book, and I didn't end up doing that. This is Pembroke House, which is in Richmond Park, and that was another thing I thought I might use. It was a cold day, and I went in there to have some tea and scones and a piece of cake. Oh, I did it all. I think I had 3 pieces. I think a scone and 2 different pieces of cake. And I was, for a while, I was thinking, oh, maybe I can work Pembroke House into the story. And I didn't, but I did. Near there is a thatched cottage. I think it's a caretaker's cottage or something in Richmond Park. And I did end up using that in the story too as a getaway cottage where Liam and Gemma spend one night on their way out of London. And they leave London for Wales and the Brecon Beacons, which I knew from a previous trip. And that's kind of that last third of the story that takes place outside London. But before I let this go on too long, I think I'll just end it there. I hope that gives you an idea of how I combine the real places with my imagination and how I do a trip with a basic skeleton of the story in my mind. And that skeleton fills as I, just from the travel experience and all the sights, smells, flavors that you get along the way. So thanks for coming with me. I hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't read Fire Maidens London, you'll see whether these places that now you've seen the pictures, whether they make the story come even more to life, or whether, if you've already read the book, I wonder whether your picture of those places matches these pictures that I've just shown you. So thanks for coming today. And I'll talk to you soon with another installment of On Location for one of my next books. Until then, bye-bye.